the delegates from each state would vote for. And it wasn't like you had a really meaningful set of primary elections at all. And in the sort of aftermath of the really violent disruptions of the 1960s, particularly the 1968 convention that named a candidate who really hadn't run in the primaries at all to run for president, you see this primary system emerge where Iowa goes first with its caucuses, New Hampshire goes second, although they call it first with their primary, right. And the other states follow along, and that sort of arbitrary beginning reigned for a long time. And then in 2008, the party tries to include some more diversity in the system, because Iowa and New Hampshire are states that are largely very white and have older populations than the rest of the country. And so that the DNC's sort of solution to that is to bring up South Carolina and Nevada and bring them into what they call this sort of early state window. Right. And that created a lot of problems.
And just to pause here, if I could, certainly, they're more diverse. I mean, South Carolina, however, is also considerably more conservative, and thus, within the context of the Democratic Party, a lot more centrist than New Hampshire would be. So, I mean, that I imagine their eye was on that as well.
Definitely. And if you talk to people in the DNC, what they'll emphasize is that South Carolina has a huge percentage of Black voters who vote in the Democratic primary, and that Black voters are really important to Democrats' electoral victories. But there's no doubt that South Carolina also has a very conservative ideological outlook relative to the rest of the country. And, it's certainly not the most progressive state, and its voters don't include a lot of the progressive voters that the party may be trying to appeal to elsewhere. What I was trying to get to is that there's this long history. Florida and Michigan jump in 2008. It causes a big problem between Clinton and Obama, because Clinton wants those votes to count, even though they're non-official, and Obama doesn't. And that first four state system sort of persists until 2020. And Iowa had a huge problem in its 2020 caucus. It's sort of a disaster, and nobody knows who's won the night of for several days after. And it kind of gave Joe Biden a boost, because he was probably fourth in that, almost certainly fourth in that ranking, but he didn't take the kind of beating you usually take if you're the vice president of the outgoing administration, running in the next presidential cycle, and you don't do well in Iowa. That's usually a pretty bad moment for you in the media, and it didn't really happen for Joe Biden.
Right. And maybe even more to the point, it deprived Bernie Sanders of a clear win and the accompanying media boost that would ordinarily entail.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we talked to Bernie Sanders folks, and they were, the Bernie Sanders campaign said they had a narrative for both a win and a loss. But what they didn't have a plan for was this sort of non-result. Often a loss gets your donors activated. People are worried. They want to boost you back up, and that can lead to a comeback in New Hampshire. And a win obviously gives you a huge media boost, lots of attention, and lots of people trying to figure out whether you're the new thing and they want to be behind you. But there's, this non-result actually sort of threw everyone off. And so there are a lot of factors that lead that people talk about in this discussion of reform of the primary calendar. And we reported in depth on that process, how it played out in the DNC, how it's ultimately, driven by Joe Biden, who writes a letter suggesting an order of the states that the Rules and Bylaws Committee and the DNC ultimately adopt, and how progressives think that South Carolina is maybe not the best state to go first. So that's something we were very interested in, something that we have a lot of reporting on, and something that I think people don't realize about those primary calendar reforms is that the DNC also said they would review them every 4 years. So every 4 years, we're going to have this contest between candidates. A Marianne Williamson or another progressive who's running the race is probably not going to want to see South Carolina go first again. Yeah. And instead of having a sort of stable primary calendar like we have in the past, we're going to have this kind of back room, smoke-filled room, if you want to say that, contest about who's first and who's second and who goes next. So it's a really interesting question, and something that we get into in depth in the Truce.
Yeah, and again, we're speaking with Hunter Walker and Luppe B. Lupin, the authors of The Truce, Progressives, Centrists, and the Future of the Democratic Party. When I listen to centrists talk about Joe Biden and the criticisms that he's received, I hear them talk about his age and focus on how to overcome that. When I hear people on the left talk about Joe Biden, I honestly hear less talk about his age than I do about his policies, about his lack of vigor with regard to pursuing progressive policy reforms, and most especially his support of Israel in the context of their invasion of Gaza. Which do you think, whose arguments, the centrists or the leftists, do you think in this particular cycle in 2024 are going to be more consequential in terms of pushing Joe Biden over the top or not?
So let's pull back for a second and go pre Gaza, right? Because first off, that's the period where we did most of the reporting for this book, but also I think the dynamic has really shifted recently. But what we saw when we were looking at all of this was that Joe Biden had, to some extent at least, managed to build bridges and heal some of the rifts associated with this, center versus left controversy that, or not center versus left controversy, but center versus left divide that certainly defined the 2016 race and defined, the congressional progressive insurgencies afterwards. And I think this primary change that Luppe was talking about is really interesting. First off, for anyone who's interested in, Bernie Sanders' loss in the Iowa caucus or supposed loss, we did a story for Talking Points Memo that has an excerpt of our chapter on the book that deals with this. And we went into depth in ways that have not been reported before in, first off, just how questionable and chaotic the result was there, and how ultimately...
I remember the famous app problems that they had throughout the state of Iowa,
Right. So if you read the book, you'll see that we, really go into detail about, just how in a good year, the caucus was sort of a black box with a questionable result. And in 2020, really, and I mean, this isn't just me talking, the AP and the New York Times have, not officially declared a winner because the result was completely in question. But what's interesting there, right, is in the aftermath of that primary, we found that Bernie Sanders ultimately, was awarded the extra delegate that he had been denied in Iowa, essentially, at least tying Pete Buttigieg, if not, officially becoming the victor. And he was awarded that through a behind-the-scenes process in negotiations with the Joe Biden campaign ahead of the convention. And there was a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiating between Biden world and Bernie world. We saw these unity commissions that involved AOC and others. And then again, we saw Ron Klain, work with the Congressional Progressive Caucus on the first-term legislative agenda. So there was a lot of intentionality, on the Biden world in at least the first half of, his first term in reaching out to progressives and fixing some of that rift, right? And then, what we've seen since then is a little bit of strain on, and a lot of this has come around Gaza. So whereas, the work that Joe Biden did is, I think, a large part of the reason you don't see AOC or Ro Khanna or, some of these more prominent progressives jump in the race. Part of the reason we're talking about, Marianne Williamson rather than some of the more established, genuinely left American political figures is that Joe Biden sort of got them to stand aside, both due to the unifying threat of Trump and due to his, real work on that front. Gaza is really threatening to blow all of it up. We see 3/4 of young voters don't approve of Biden's handling of this. A large percentage of the Democratic base thinks that what Israel's doing is a genocide. And we've seen Jayapal, this key progressive legislative ally for the Biden administration, give recent interviews where she said, I don't feel like this is the same Biden that we had in the beginning. And then, I'm worried that this coalition we built is fractured. So I think what readers will find if they dig into the truth is they learn who the players are. They learn, what the different pieces are of the coalition. And I think in a really complex way that goes beyond just, simply center and left, we delve into, the characters in each pole of the party. And it really sets the stage for an election where more than ever now post Gaza, it's a question about whether Biden can manage to hold it all together.
Based on the reporting and research that you guys have done so far, is there anything that you believe we can anticipate about Joe Biden's approach to Gaza, at the very least, with respect to talking about it to his own base, or God forbid, actually doing something different in terms of his actual policy? How do you anticipate him approaching that as 2024 proceeds? Because the fighting in Gaza, the destruction in Gaza, does not seem to be dying down or going away to any appreciable extent. How do you think he will approach this?
Well, it is a very important question, and I won't presume to forecast exactly how I'll approach it. But let me just explain some of the reporting we did in the book about how he's been helped and influenced, and how I think that people are attuned to the issue of appealing to the concerns that so many progressive people and so many young people have about what's going on in Gaza. We report, the period we reported for this book covered the run up to the 2020 election,
right?
And we look at how, number one, Joe Biden's sort of principal benefactor in presidential politics, the former President Barack Obama. We found the remarks he'd given to a group of young legislators behind closed doors in 2019, emphasizing the importance of reaching out to young voters, to progressive voters, to making them feel listened to and empowered in the campaigns. That's something Obama said to every incoming freshman legislator in the Congress in 2019. And we also reported on Obama's intervention in the 2020 primary. That Obama, we learned, made calls to almost all the centrist candidates in the race and said to them, listen, give it your best shot. I'm not prejudging this, but you are going to hear from me again. And we do need to consolidate, because Donald Trump, the implication is, because Donald Trump is such a threat, we need to make sure this party is unified to win. And in the process of putting this book out this month, we went back to some of our sources in Obama world and talked to them about what they thought was the most important issue in 2024. And once again, they said that he's focused on young voters, and he's focused on their concerns and making them feel empowered. And so I can't predict for you what Joe Biden's going to do. There's a lot of influences on a U.S. president, no doubt. But I think the people who are focused on this campaign and what's going to happen next are going to be, pressuring him to make young voters feel empowered, and make them feel listened to. And that's something that, it is an issue that is very, very fractious, as Hunter said. It's something that threatens to blow up the coalition between centrists and progressives. And so I would expect to see movement. But that is just based on the reporting that we've done on influences on Biden, and not based on any kind of looking glass I can see through to see what he's actually doing.
Sure. No, I understand that, and I hope that you are correct. And I would hope that in a sane world it would manifest itself again. Additionally, not just through messaging, but in an actual policy shift in response to the base of what his voters want. I mean, really. That really is, I think, what any leader or politician should do, and pay attention, if they hope to be reelected, to what the people who are likely to vote for them will actually do. But 2024 will tell. Hey, I want to thank the both of you, Hunter Walker and Luppe B. Lupin. They are the authors of